So now what's fun is we could go in and start like changing. So regarding the patches, I've listened to both examples and
Yes.
without trying to get too in depth with it, generally speaking, when I approach that type of sound design, I look at fundamentally what we're trying to achieve, which is a very full sound, right?
Yes.
A very full, noisy, aggressive sound.
Correct.
What's the best thing that we can start off with that would have that? Noise.
The noise oscillator. Yes. Yes.
Quite, no, actually, quite literally just noise, because noise has all the frequencies, so we can work with all the frequencies, and it has the whole spectrum, so it'll fill up everything. We don't have to use any distortion or anything like that, because noise has everything. The interesting part is when you loop noise, it becomes less random, especially if you loop noise over a short period of time. In this case, what I'm doing is I'm still getting some of my own flavor in there, and I'm still using an oscillator and using some unison to sort of smoothen it out. But the noise is making a big difference in here. So the first patch is the noise bass. And in this case, it changes with every quarter note. So I'm going to put this down like here. So this is just straight Serum. You can tell maybe we can throw on a disperser and maybe like a saturator, but it doesn't quite need much more dispersers because I usually like doing some of the low end and then some. You can also hear a little bit of reverb in there, just to give it some space. But what I have here primarily is just one wavetable that gives it some of the sort of bass characteristic. And then, so that would be just that bass.
Almost like a growl-based table, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like a regular complex sort of bass wavetable. I have a lot of them also on my Patreon, just a bunch of like regular bass wavetables. You can make your own by just like having like, say, a glitch sample, bass glitch sample, and then turning that into a wavetable. I think particularly Faceplant is really good at that. It's really good at doing that because you can then cut out the low end and replace it with a clean sub. You can, it even has, funny enough, it has sort of a spectral compressor in there as well to like even out the frequency. It has a lot of options, but if you just use a fairly noisy complex wavetable, and then in this case, what I'm doing is I'm using a remap, and what this does is it does the opposite of what sync does. Usually when you use sync, and I'm gonna have to remove this, or I'll just put it here for now. If you use sync, usually that pitches it up, right?
Yes.
But sync can't pitch down. What if we wanted more like just lower pitch, but the same speed of the oscillator? You can do this with remap. With remap, you can essentially just shorten the time. So if I move this, you can see it's pulling on the sides. And now you just have less, or just the middle part of the wavetable stretched. What that effectively does is pitch it down. It will add some artifacts here and there because it's a saw wave sort of cycle style motion. So you're gonna have some clicking in the left and right corner. But what's really cool about it is it's essentially formant shifting. It's even keeping the fundamental. If we were to turn off the sub here, and let's turn off, I'm going to put the reverbs and stuff over here. I'm just going to disable them. Take a look at, for example, the EQ8 here. Take a look at the sub region.
Yeah, it just leaves it alone.
It just doesn't touch it, right? So it's like a formant shift. It's formant shifting the wavetable, which is huge because usually people don't usually do this. You can do the same thing in Faceplant. And there you just do FM. So it's basically just phase modulation with a saw wave. And then you just do negative phase modulation there, so negative FM, which you can't do in Serum. So if you had negative FM in Serum, you could do it here as well, but you don't. So you can just use the remap and essentially pitch your wavetables up and down. And what that allows you to do, of course, is to then just have a little bit of, if you have a sequence. Oh wait, I may have to pull this out. You can have a bit of a pitch variation in it.
Okay. Yeah.
Then I'm changing the wavetable position here. I'm going to turn on. I'm actually going to have that off for now. You can see I'm using 7 unison with the width at 0.
Okay.
So it's giving us
no
that
extra,
Q sound.
Yeah.
But I'm actually just slightly blending it in. And the trick here is to actually use an uneven number in the unison. Because if you take a look at this, if I hold this, you can see there's one middle line and the other ones are red. If I put it to 8, we have 2 middle ones. And the issue here is, even if I turn down the blend, you still hear two voices. If you have at 7, it's just one.
Yes.
But the other ones we can now blend in.
That makes sense.
Then we're running through a high notch filter.
Yeah.
I also have the sub here, which is also going into the high notch filter. No, actually, no, it's not. It's going past. That was the other patch. That's going past. And then we have quite literally just pink noise. But you can hear, this is just pink noise, but you can hear something in there. If you just imagine for a second, that sounds potentially just like a really distorted bass with a formant.
Yeah.
Right? So if we combine the two, and then we start running it through processing, some hyper and dimension, some flanging. So we're also now obviously introducing the noise as well. Compressor, EQ, and then distortion to also crunch the noise. Without the noise, it wouldn't be nearly as dramatic. What we can do is we can also pull back the distortion and then add even more noise. You can hear how aggressive that noise makes everything sound. Now we can also change the phase and we will get a slightly different tone. Which is something that most people don't think would happen with noise, right? They think noise, well, it'll always sound the same. But if you have a sample, not an oscillator, but a sample, changing the position of where the noise starts is actually really, really useful.
Yeah.
The other bass that I've done, besides this one, which, as you can see, this once again, we just have 2 dispersers on here. The other one that I've done is one of the, and I think that was the more interesting part about the other demo, is the sustain. Because the sustain was giving a lot of the grit in the other demo. So I'm just going to layer this with the second patch, which uses a pretty cool technique as well. I'm going to make this one long
boy.
That's what it sounds like. It's the noise sustain bass. So this is using, once again, pink noise without it. You can tell all that energy is gone, right? Like, yeah, we have the mid frequencies and we have sort of the body and the sub. But just that simple pink noise, which is pretty funny to me as well, because you use noise that's called pink noise, which is usually associated with something not dark and gritty and heavy.
Yeah.
But you use it for something dark and gritty and heavy. And then we have sub. I'll just sort of go through the layers. So we have the main. This is Monster 1 wavetable right here. And I'm using asymmetrical plus minus. And I actually prefer this over bend plus minus because it sounds more natural compared to bend plus minus. Bend plus minus usually very quickly sounds like a growl or like sort of
like
very
growl
big
wave. Yeah.
Yeah. Asymmetrical sounds very natural in a lot of cases. So I can go through. Then I'm actually just using a peak filter rather than like a high pass or band or a band pass, because I wanted the sub to go through this as actually no, I didn't want the sub to go through this. I wanted the sub from the wavetable to go into this filter and then use the drive to distort this wavetable with the noise. If I take this out, you can hear that the noise is too clean,
powerful,
right?
Yeah.
So distorting it directly in the filter means that now those two are sort of more glued, I guess, in the sense of processed together. And then on top of that, obviously, we get the peaks, which make a big difference. On the effects, we have hyperdimension, of course. We have some more distortion. In this case, also makes a difference. What I'm doing here is I'm now slowly removing the sub that was initially in this wavetable, so that the distortion here isn't just adding crunch, but just, you know, saturating everything. Exactly. If we had the sub in there. I'm just trying to get it sort of more saturated. Then I'm using the compressor here. And then just a final EQ to clean up the lows and remove some of the mid frequencies. And lastly, well, besides the sub, that's just like direct out, not that interesting. The sub, this oscillator B, I mean, is a sine wave that is at an arbitrary pitch. And that gives you that sort of interesting motion. What's happening here is I'm using just a sine wave, and I'm using AM from A, which does ring modulation from this oscillator.
That's a really cool movement too, in the sound.
Yeah, and so that's giving you that sort of, you know, it's using this as a volume LFO essentially for this wave, for this sine wave, which you would think wouldn't do a lot, but as you can hear, it's almost like it's imposing itself onto the sine wave. But because the sine wave isn't perfectly pitched, you're getting this. You're getting this in between movement. You can combine that. And you get these really cool sort of tonal sections there. You can hear without it.
Yeah. That's a lot.
And we can. But all of that sort of hyperness, right? That aggressiveness is still coming from the noise. You just don't notice it because you're so focused on the mid-frequency stuff.
Yeah,
and that's the interesting part, is you can just get away with using noise. If we wanted something a little bit less tonal, we could like lower it.
Yeah. If you throw a quick drum loop on that, you got a subsidia drop in under 5 minutes.
We can probably do something like this. Let's do that, and then. Oh, it's there. So let's go in and bring in some drums. Sidechain from the kick channel. Whoops, that's the clap channel. Also, one thing I can recommend if you use Kickstart is the first Kickstart you use for just the sub, so use the band function. So that the kick and the sub are clean, crossfaded, but that doesn't mean that this overall sidechain should be that long. So the second one, that's right after, can just be shorter. That's just taking care of the mids and the highs.
Okay.
Then the clap. Sometimes it'll detect, maybe not. No, fine, yeah. And then lastly, I'll take these two, put them on here on the cymbals. So now what's fun is we could go in and start like changing. That's nasty too. Yeah. That sounds super nice. You could try potentially like changing the pitch of this. This might work. So just a little bit.
Is that Rapture? What was it? Company that person?
And then this is obviously, so this is specifically designed to do this, but we could put this in envelopes so they're all the same. The idea here is because we can just slightly change the wavetable position, slightly change the remap, we can get very different results. But like we say, we take this. Let's change the wavetable position here, for example. I'm gonna take this out. One more thing I would recommend is obviously if you're layering stuff to maybe like dip the mids a little bit on the sustain, just so you leave a little bit of, because they're currently fighting. And this obviously massively depends on where you put the wavetable position, what kind of wavetable you use.
Absolutely. Well, there's so much variation in one pack, you know?
Yeah.
So
the interesting part is that usually wavetables aren't that noisy, right? They can't be because they're just one cycle. Like there's only so much you can do. One last tip that I have though is that if you are using the noise in the oscillator, you can try FM from noise. I didn't use it in this patch, but it does have some interest. Sounds kind of weird, could be usable in some kind of way, but yeah, usually just asymmetrical, you know, get the tonal component with the wavetable and then get the noisy component with the pink noise.
Oh, that's awesome info. It's been a pleasure, man. I know this probably went on way longer than you thought. You've been more than insightful on everything. Is there anything you have coming out soon or you want to promote or anything?
Well, you can check my YouTube channel from time to time because I am slowly probably getting back into streaming. I did stream just recently 2 times, but yeah, that's probably something I'm going to start doing more. And so if you're interested in more of this kind of content, I will probably start streaming more soon.
Awesome. And then everyone I'll link your Patreon because it's probably the best out there. Everything you're doing in the scene is helping artists, and from everyone that I've heard of, they appreciate you a ton. I appreciate your time today. I know it's super late for you and you want to get going, so we can leave it off here, man.